Hey guys, tonight we're not diving into castles or kingdoms, but into a place much quieter, red, dry, and humming low under the moon. A land where your footsteps disappear into dust before you can turn around. This isn't Europe with its plagues and pettiness. This is somewhere older. Australia? Yes, but not the Australia of suntan surfers and souvenir shops. We're going back way back to a medieval world that most maps didn't even bother to draw. And even if they did, it would have been labeled something like Terra Incognita or Here Be Dragons. Except the dragons in this place don't breathe fire, they slither, or perch in trees, or crawl out of your water bucket when you least expect it. You see, surviving here wasn't about swords or shields. It was about listening, and sweating, and watching everything because everything watched back. This continent didn't wait to be colonized to start its stories. It already had 1,000 of them, all wrapped in sand, bark, and silence. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to drop your location and your local time. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're sitting on rock. Not a throne, not a bench. Just a rock. It's smooth not because it was carved, but because centuries of backsides polished it that way. The air is sharp with iron scent, the dust fine enough to coat your eyelashes. The ground here doesn't echo, it absorbs. And what it doesn't absorb, the wind scatters. You've arrived in the middle of a continent that didn't need your arrival. The ancestors of the land have been walking it for tens of thousands of years, and they knew something you're about to learn the hard way, that this place isn't out to kill you. But it won't lift a finger to keep you alive either. You've barely set your feet down, and the first thing that greets you isn't an animal or a person, but heat. Not just the dry kind that warms your skin. No, this is the kind of heat that feels like it's trying to rewrite your DNA. It crawls down your neck, makes your clothes heavier, and turns your breath into something thick. No shade, no sound. Just you and the knowledge that you're not in charge here. You remember stories of brave explorers. You laugh. No compass can point your way through land that changes its shape every season, that swallows paths in minutes with wind and time. Medieval Europeans wrote of lands like this as if they were cursed unlivable, savage, wild. What they didn't realize is that people had been surviving here without cathedrals, without steel, without maps. They had knowledge you couldn't scribble onto parchment, like how to follow birds to hidden water, how to crack a root open just right to squeeze out enough liquid to survive one more day, how to walk across sand that looks soft but will burn through your soles, and how to move without leaving signs that something edible had passed through. If you're not paying attention, the land doesn't give you a second warning. And when it does whisper, it sounds like rustling grass, or maybe the sudden absence of a bird song. That's usually enough to make anyone sit very, very still. You might think your biggest challenge here is finding food, but you haven't even tried sleeping yet. The nights here are not empty. They're crowded with creatures that don't need to see you to find you. Marsupials with eyes that catch the light like old coins. Insects with stingers fine as fish bones. And snakes that move like bad dreams, quiet, smooth, and exactly where your hand was about to go. Some of them are venomous. Yes, some are just curious. And the real fun begins when you can't tell which is which. One mainstream fact that doesn't get enough attention: Australia is home to more species of venomous creatures than any other continent. Not just the usual suspects like snakes and spiders, fish, mollusks. Even caterpillars can take you down if you misstep. That's right, caterpillars. It's like nature got bored and decided to weaponize the entire food chain. But then you learn what the old tribes always knew. Survival isn't about conquering the land, it's about reading it. You stop looking for straight paths. You start listening to silence. You notice when the wind shifts, and you learn what certain bird calls mean. Some are alarms, others are invitations. You observe how kangaroo tracks cross emu tracks, and what that says about water nearby. These aren't just footprints, they're messages in the sand. Forget armor and spears. Your real defense is observation, your greatest weapon memory. Quirky fact: to avoid leaving footprints, some people used to brush behind them with sticks made of kangaroo tail fur natural brooms, tied at the ends. soft enough to blend prints but stiff enough to erase them from sand or ash. There are stories of trackers who could follow a person through terrain after a single missed toe press. Not just they went that way, but how fast they were moving, whether they were tired, limping, or carrying something heavy. You begin to realize this place is an archive, but not on paper. The land remembers you, just never learned how to read it. Historians still argue whether certain nomadic groups built semi-permanent camps during certain seasons or remained strictly mobile. Archaeological traces are minimal because organic materials, grass, bark, ochre disappear without a trace in just a few decades. What remains are stone tools, ashes, sometimes fire-blackened soil, enough to hint, but not enough to confirm. Still, those questions don't matter when you're squatting in the dirt, hoping your fire doesn't attract attention, and wondering whether that rustle you just heard is a lizard or something worse. You eat when you can, roots, seeds, whatever doesn't bite back. But even food has rules. Some things must be soaked for hours to remove toxins. Others must be roasted just right, or they'll swell your throat shut. This isn't just dinner, it's a test. Every bite is a negotiation with chemistry and timing, and you don't get second chances. That's why the knowledge passed down wasn't shouted or written, it was sung. In rhythm, in stories, in movements, songlines. They're called a literal map embedded in melody, where every note is a direction and every lyric a landmark. When you sing it right, you're not just walking, you're remembering. Following the path of ancestors who made it through with fewer tools but more attention. And then night finally falls. The stars above look close enough to taste. The sky sharp with clarity you've never seen in the city. But you don't stare too long, because in the darkness, other things move. And you need to know where your hands are, where your feet are, where your fire is. You lie back, head resting on a bundle of grass, and try to sleep. The land does not rock you gently. It waits, it tests, and somewhere out there, something else breathes, watching. The second the sun disappears behind that scorched tree line, your instincts start whispering things your rational mind doesn't want to hear. You'd think nightfall would bring relief, but this is when the rules change. The day may have been harsh, but at least it was visible. Now, you're in the dark, and that's when the needle-toothed bats come out. They don't screech like storybook vampires, they hum. Tiny vibrations just above your hearing range, like a chorus of irritated sewing machines. You first notice them when something grazes your ear, too soft to be a leaf and too fast to be wind. Then another, you look up, nothing, but you feel watched, not in a paranoid way, but in a something is triangulating your warmth way. These bats aren't the blood-drinking kind that tabloids love, but they are hunting moths, small frogs, maybe a beetle that just climbed onto your leg. You can't see them. You only hear the absence of insect chirping, the hush before a strike, and the slight flutter that means it found dinner inches from your face. They have teeth like needles, hence the name. Not big enough to break skin, but sharp enough to remind you that you're made of meat. The medieval Australians, of course, didn't call them anything so precise. They had dreaming stories for them spirits with wings, bringers of messages, or sometimes warnings. The stories weren't meant to comfort you. They were meant to teach you. Stay near the smoke, don't sleep with your face exposed, and always listen when the silence arrives too suddenly. These weren't myths to be enjoyed, they were operating manuals for staying alive. Your fire is small, not for lack of wood, but by design. Too much light invites too many questions. Light is a scream in the darkness, and you don't want to scream out here. The embers crackle softly, casting shadows that move like creatures of their own. You huddle near it, hoping the warmth masks your scent. But fire is both friend and traitor. It keeps the cold away, yes, but it also gives your position away to anything flying, crawling, or slithering with better eyes than yours. You sip slowly from a bark cup, the water lukewarm and tasting faintly of earth and smoke. You're not picky anymore. That ended hours ago. One mainstream fact early inhabitants knew that bats weren't just scenery. They were part of the ecosystem's pulse. Bats kept insect populations in check. Entire patches of land thrived or suffered depending on their flight patterns. and certain tribes would track bat migrations to anticipate the arrival of the seasonal rains. These weren't just animals, they were calendars in motion. But tonight, you don't feel like watching a calendar. You feel like hiding from one. A quirkier detail slips in as you shift your sleeping mat closer to the tree base. Some elders believed that if a bat brushed your eyelids while you slept, it would steal your dreams, leaving you confused, lost, or worse, forgetful of important paths. So, in certain regions, they'd smear ash over their eyelids before bed, not for war paint, but as protection. It was said to confuse the spirits, make them think your eyes were already dead. Creepy. Sure, effective. Well, you're considering it right now, aren't you? You lie back, eyes wide to the darkness above. There's a moon tonight, dull and blurry, as if someone smudged it with a thumb. It barely helps. The stars are crisper. They feel more permanent, but then your gaze drifts lower, and you realize something is perched on a branch above you. Not moving, just there. A lump at first. Then it shifts slightly, revealing tiny claws gripping bark. A bat, big one, watching you like you're late to something. Maybe it's waiting for insects. Maybe it's waiting for you to fall asleep. You don't want to think about which. Historians still argue whether bats in medieval Australia were actively feared or simply tolerated. The evidence is thin. Some cave art suggests reverence wings etched with deliberate symmetry, dots circling heads like halos or fireflies. Others show them alongside serpents and fire, hinting at danger. But interpretations vary. Was it symbolic literal? You're lying under one right now, so your guess is survival over symbolism. There's a rustle behind you. Low and close, you freeze, breathing shallow, not wind, too patterned. You shift slowly, eyes scanning. A goanna lizard, maybe a meter long, shuffles past your firelight. It doesn't care about you, or so you hope. Goannas have claws made for climbing and tongues that flick like accusations. It noses a pile of dried bark, then moves on, dragging its tail in a lazy question mark. You remember something an elder said earlier, if the goannas are moving, the snakes are resting, it's meant to be reassuring. It's not. You try not to think about the possibility of stepping on one tomorrow, or worse, rolling over one tonight. You wrap your arms around yourself and lean into the tree's base. The bark presses your spine in knotted ridges, but you welcome the discomfort. It's proof you're still here. Somewhere in the distance, a series of clicks begins, soft and rhythmic. You freeze again. More bats. No, this is different. Frogs, crickets. No. Human-made. No. Too irregular. You don't figure it out until it ends as abruptly as it began. That's part of the experience here. Not every sound has a name, and not every name has a face. Sleep comes in pieces, not in hours. You drift in and out, eyes fluttering at each crackle, each flap of wings, each shifting breeze. Time becomes soft, stretched like tree sap. You dream of wings and firelight, but mostly you dream of being left alone. The kind of dream that's more wish than narrative. Your body adjusts, your hearing sharpens, you don't relax. Relaxing is for towns with doors. Here, you just become less tense, and that's a win. You've started to learn the pace of this place. Nothing here rushes, except death. Everything else, movement, growth, hunger flows like water underground unseen. Patient, dangerous. The bats are still flying. You can hear them now, not just feel them. Their sonar clicks echo off tree trunks, invisible maps being drawn mid-air. You wonder what your outline looks like to them. A heat signature, a threat, a rock with a heartbeat? You'll never know. But they know. And for some reason, they don't swoop. You take that as a win. Small victories, measured in what doesn't happen. One final thought before your eyes close again. You are part of this now. Not in a poetic way, but in a literal one. Your sweat is on the bark. Your scent is on the grass. Your breath mixes with the fire smoke. The animals already know you're here. The land will remember. And when you move tomorrow, it'll take days before it forgets your presence, or forgives it. Sleep, if you can, but don't let your guard down. The bats don't. You wake up with bark stuck to your cheek and a crick in your neck that feels like it was hammered in overnight. The fire's mostly ash now, but a few embers pulse faintly. like the last whispers of a dream you can't quite remember. The bats are gone, or rather, they've disappeared into whatever fold in the darkness they came from. But don't relax yet. Now it's the ground you have to worry about. You shift your feet and instantly regret it. The soles of your shoes, if you can call this scrappy binding of bark, sinew, and hope a shoe are already disintegrating. You tug one off, examine the layers, and wince. The underside looks like someone tried to grate cheese with it. Welcome to the fine art of bark shoes, an invention born not out of style or innovation, but pure desperation. You wouldn't believe what happens to human feet after a few weeks of walking barefoot across rocks that feel like they were kiln-fired by the sun itself. You need something between you and the land, even if it's just a whisper-thin layer of eucalyptus. Early Australians didn't wear shoes in the European sense, but they did wrap their feet in bark, reeds, or kangaroo hide when terrain demanded it. Bark shoes weren't about protection from thorns. They were about not cooking your feet before breakfast. You learn quickly walk before the sun's up, rest at midday, and never step on shadowed rocks without testing them first. Sometimes snakes curl there, enjoying their version of a cold plunge. You don't want to interrupt that kind of spa day. The bark shoes help with more than just heat. 2, they muffle your steps. A good pair can let you cross a dried creek bed without kicking up more than dust. Bad shoes, they announce your arrival to every predator and prey in a 3-mile radius. And out here, making noise isn't brave, it's an obituary. You sit on a flat rock and try to retie the sinew around your makeshift soles. It's already fraying. You wonder, not for the first time, if you're getting weaker, or if the land is simply wearing you down one layer at a time. Probably both. A loud bird screeches somewhere above, and a cascade of eucalyptus nuts fall nearby. You flinch again, but it's nothing. Just gravity and birds with poor manners. You breathe through your nose and feel the dryness of it, the scratch in your throat, the ache in your lower back. Your body is trying to negotiate with the elements, and the elements are winning. A mainstream historical fact, while Europeans were busy equating footwear with civility, Indigenous Australians were mastering terrain reading barefoot. It wasn't about toughness, it was about feedback. Every grain of sand, every shift in the earth beneath your heel told you something. And while bark shoes were used sparingly, often during specific tasks like hunting in rough country or crossing burning ground, most of the time, the foot was teacher and student. You don't get that from leather boots. Quirky detail. Some tribes used tree resin to harden parts of their bark wrappings, making a crude kind of sole that could grip rocky surfaces like a gecko's foot. Not exactly Air Jordans, but you'd be surprised how efficient sticky bark can be when chasing a goanna through scrubland. Of course, you're not chasing anything. You're just trying not to limp. Your left foot has a blister the size of a gum nut, and your right heel feels like it's made of raw glass. You shift your weight awkwardly and start to walk again, grateful for every leaf you don't step on. There's a path ahead, not a road, not even a track, just a thinning of the brush that suggests something passed through here once, and maybe again after that. You follow it because you need to. And because not following it means bush bashing your way through scrub dense enough to skin your arms. You duck under a low branch and get a face full of spiderweb. You freeze, wipe your eyes, and suppress a shudder. The spider's gone, or watching, or asleep. You tell yourself it's probably tiny. Then you remember that tiny here is a relative term, and that funnel webs like to dig burrows where your fingers might be in a few minutes, if you're not careful. Historians still argue whether the bark wrapping technique originated in one region and spread across trade routes, or whether it emerged spontaneously in multiple places based on necessity, given the isolation between language groups and the variety of terrain. It's hard to say. What's clear is that survival wasn't about one tool. It was about thousands of micro-adaptations that, together, formed a life system. Bark shoes weren't innovation, they were instinct made wearable. You stop to rest again near a cluster of termite mounds towering structures, some as tall as your waist, made from a mix of dirt, spit, and sheer patience. You wouldn't think much of them until you remember they're warm inside. People used to track them in colder months, sometimes even cracking into the sides to find warm air and, occasionally, protein. You're not quite there yet, but you do lay a hand on one, warm, dry, humming softly. Everything here hums if you're quiet enough. There's movement on the horizon, a small herd of kangaroos, bouncing away from something or toward something. You don't care what. You're just happy it's not you. They're fleeing. You adjust your bark shoes again, tightening the knots, and try to ignore the callus you can feel tearing into something softer. You're learning the rhythm now. Left foot, right foot, pause, listen. The forest never stops talking. Sometimes it whispers with falling seeds. Other times it scolds with cracking branches or the sudden absence of wind. You step in time with it, not to master it, but to be ignored by it. You pass a creek bed, long dry, the rocks rounded from floods that might return once every 5 or 10 years. You find prints, human, old, faint, but still there. Toes, heel, a dragging stick. Maybe someone passed through here weeks ago, maybe longer, but they were barefoot. You can tell from the depth of the impressions and the spacing. They moved quickly. You feel an odd companionship with these faded marks. Someone else walked this hellscape with less, and left more behind. Your stomach growls. You ignore it. There's nothing here you trust enough to eat. Not yet. Your water's low. Your firewood is damp from dew, and your shoes are more bark than shoe. But you're alive. The sun is rising steadily now, and with it, the heat. You wrap a cloth around your head, makeshift shade, and press on. Every stone underfoot reminds you that you're not meant to last here. And yet, you do. Step by blistered step. The sun is fully up now. And it's not just hot, it's surgical. The light feels like it's dissecting you, peeling away any illusion of comfort you clung to in the shadows of night. You squint toward the horizon and find no mercy. Just shimmering heat, ripples dancing off red earth like ghosts waving you back. You haven't seen water in hours, and your tongue feels like it's trying to turn itself into leather. And yet, you keep walking, because somewhere up ahead, there's a waterhole. Or at least, there was one, according to the elder who marked your path on a rock with charcoal and quiet eyes. You follow the sign's bent grasses, a certain lean in the trees, the way the birds are circling. That's the trick to finding water here. Not by sight, but by symptom. Nature doesn't give directions. It gives hints. And right now, every hint says you're getting close. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe 2 hours. You pray it's closer, or at least not crawling with something that's already laid claim. When you do find it, it doesn't look like a scene from paradise. There's no glistening pool, no fresh spring bubbling politely over smooth pebbles. It's a depression in the earth, ringed with rocks and blackened roots. At first glance, it looks dry, but when you crouch down and brush your fingers along the cracked clay, you find a moist spot. Not enough to drink, but enough to know you're not hallucinating. You begin to dig, not with tools, you don't have those, just hands, cracked nails, and the heel of your bark shoe. And there it is, slowly seeping water, murky, brown, barely moving, but it's wet. And out here, wet is holy. You scoop a palmful to your mouth and pause. This is the tricky part, because not everything wet is safe. You glance around, noting flattened grass nearby, faint tracks pressed into the mud, webbed, clawed, long tail dragging between them. And you know immediately you're not alone. Freshwater eels, not the gentle kind that glide silently past your feet in a modern aquarium. These are muscular, territorial, and old. Older than the stories that warn about them. One flick of the water and they're gone, just a ripple and a shadow where your reflection used to be. It's not that they're hunting you, it's just that you're both trying to drink from the same place. And this place doesn't allow second helpings. One mainstream fact that surprises modern visitors: freshwater eels in Australia have long been part of the ecosystem and food sources. In many indigenous cultures, they were both feared and revered. Catching them required patience, timing, and a lot of respect. The eels could grow large over a meter and had a knack for surviving in muddy, shrinking pools that looked abandoned to the untrained eye. The medieval survival trick was not just finding water, but knowing what lived inside it. A quirkier detail: some communities whispered that certain eels were shapeshifters, beings that could listen, remember, and even hold grudges. To harm one without proper ritual or apology was to invite sickness or misdirection. It wasn't superstition, it was psychological survival, a way to enforce restraint in a place where overuse could doom an entire clan. You sip, cautiously, avoiding the center of the pool, just enough to wet your throat. You'll boil more later. Maybe, if nothing else claims the fire first. Historians still argue whether medieval indigenous Australians constructed artificial watering systems beyond simple wells. Some point to large stone arrangements and aquaculture sites in Victoria that suggest long-term planning controlled flow, eel traps, and seasonal migration paths. Others argue these were regional exceptions, not widespread systems. Either way, when you're crouching at the edge of a warm puddle, hoping nothing bites your hand off, the debate feels academic. You sit back, water dripping from your chin, and take stock. The eels haven't surfaced again, but you feel their presence like a pressure in the air. You keep your limbs close, just a few gulps more, and then you rise, wiping your hands on the front of your tunic, leaving reddish smears of mud and sweat. You don't trust this place to let you linger. It's the kind of waterhole that doesn't mind giving, but might take something back if you get greedy. You back away slowly, eyes never leaving the still surface behind you. Dry grass sways in a breeze you didn't notice before. It's cooler here, slightly shaded by overhanging limbs. You settle near a crooked tree, twisted into a shape that looks halfway between shelter and warning. Your bark shoes have held together, barely, but your toes are sore and your heels raw. You think about soaking your feet in the waterhole, but something deep in your gut whispers don't. You listen. Instead, you wrap your feet in scraps of damp cloth, lean back against the tree, and let your mind drift. You think about the creatures who drink from this place when you're not around. Kangaroos. Sure, maybe wallabies, but also monitor lizards, snakes, birds of prey. You remember the story someone told about a man who fell asleep beside a waterhole and never woke up. They said it wasn't a creature that got him, it was thirst. He dreamed so vividly of drinking that his body forgot to wake up. You smile faintly, not because it's funny, but because you understand. Out here, your mind sometimes offers you mercy, the land won't. You pull out a strip of dried root from your pouch, chewy, bitter, but full of electrolytes. Your jaw works lazily, and you feel the bark fibers split and release moisture. It's not food, it's fuel. There's a difference. You're not trying to feast, you're just trying to keep going. And sometimes that means accepting less than you want, but just enough to matter. You check your direction. The sun's moved, of course, always faster than you think. You squint to orient yourself using the curve of shadows and the lean of tall grasses. You remember the old rule when in doubt. Follow the birds. You see a cluster of small black ones circling low in the distance. Not vultures, Australia doesn't have them. These are crows, clever, watchful, and often near something dead or something edible. Either way, they know something. So, you follow, not directly, but at an angle just enough to shadow their path without stepping into their judgment. You begin walking again, feet sore but determined. You've drank, you've rested, and your senses are tuned. The land feels a little less hostile now, not because it's changed, but because you've passed another test. You've shared a drink with an eel and kept all your fingers. That's something. You move slower now, deliberate. You step around loose rocks, you brush aside webs with a stick, and you keep one eye always on the horizon, where the dust swirls in patterns that might be wind or something else entirely. You walk until the air shifts. It's not cooler, nothing's cooler, but heavier, thicker, like you've stepped into a different kind of silence. Your shoulders tense without thinking, and your pace slows. Something about the way the trees are spaced here makes you feel like you've wandered into someone else's camp. Or worse, something's hunting ground. The land isn't flat anymore. It rolls, dips subtly, and the brush has been pushed back in certain places, not broken, bent, like something big has passed through recently, but didn't bother hiding. And then you spotted a crude scaffold lashed together with twisted wood and sinew, rising about 6 feet off the ground. It's a sleeping tower, not a lookout in the military sense, but a place to stay off the dirt while you close your eyes. The Aboriginal peoples of certain flood-prone and crocodile-heavy regions had long known that ground sleep was optional and often unwise. So, they built up nothing fancy, just enough elevation to stay above what slithered, stalked, or snapped. You circle it slowly, your eyes tracing the lashings. There's no iron here, just vine, bark rope, and clever interlocking. It's not meant to last forever, just long enough to survive a few nights. You climb it carefully. The wood creaks but holds. At the top, there's a platform, flat and worn smooth from long use. Scorch marks suggest a small fire was once lit here, maybe just coals. Enough for warmth without smoke. You sit down, stretching your legs, and feel the welcome shift of perspective. Being off the ground changes everything. You can see farther, you can breathe easier, and for the first time today, you stop flinching at every rustle. One mainstream fact: crocodiles have been hunting in Australia's northern regions for millions of years. Saltwater crocodiles, particularly, can grow over 6 meters and have been known to travel inland through brackish rivers and seasonal floodplains. Sleeping beside the water without elevation isn't brave. It's just bait. These towers were never universal, but in croc country, they were essential. And even now, some remote communities still raise shelters just high enough to matter. The quirk crocodiles don't just attack from water. They wait, they study. Some accounts describe them circling camps at night. Not in fury, but in patience. One step, pause, one breath, pause, for hours. They've been known to stalk sleeping humans for nights before attempting a strike. That's not instinct. That's strategy. That's why the raised beds weren't just practical. They were psychological shields. Even if a croc never came, sleeping higher reminded you that you were being watched, and that was enough to keep you alert. Historians still debate how widespread these sleep towers were, and whether they were primarily croc defenses or multi-purpose platforms to avoid insects, floods, and snakes. But you're not in the mood for debate. You're in the mood for elevation. For that small illusion of control in a place where your life expectancy drops every time you kneel to tie your shoe. You lie back on the wooden slats, arms folded behind your head. From here, the canopy above looks less like a ceiling and more like a breathing thing. The wind weaves between branches, and you see a hawk circling far above, gliding, indifferent. You breathe deeper, slower, letting your chest rise in time with the breeze. This isn't comfort, exactly, but it's the closest you've had to it in days. You feel a little safer, which is dangerous. Safety is a narcotic here. You take too much of it, you get sloppy, you start assuming you're alone. And that's when the land reminds you you're not. A sound pierces the quiet, a heavy splash. Distant but clear. You bolt upright, eyes scanning. It came from the east. Just beyond a stand of paperbark trees. You can't see the water, but the noise was unmistakable. Something big entered a pool. Could have been a kangaroo. Could have been a buffalo. Could have been worse. You stay frozen, muscles tight, until the silence returns. Then a bird calls 3 notes, rising. You don't know the species, but you know the tone. It's not alarmed, just annoyed. So you settle again. Nerves buzzing, but body still. Later, you descend, slowly, methodically. You don't leap from this tower like it's a porch. You treat the ground like a sleeping enemy. When your feet touch dirt again, you feel it the change. Like stepping off a boat back onto land. You're exposed again. You move carefully through the bush, tracing the edge of a dry creek bed, eyes scanning for movement. Everything here is both camouflage and trap. A root might be a snake. A puddle might be a predator. Even a breeze might be a decoy. You find tracks again? Not yours. Not recent. But strange. Wide, heavy, splayed claws. Probably goanna. Maybe larger. You crouch, fingers brushing the edge of the print. It's old, dry at the center, but big. Too big for comfort. You keep walking. You don't want to meet whatever made that impression. You hum softly, a habit you've picked up not to entertain, but to echo. Sound tells you when the brush ahead is too thick. or when something reflects it wrong. Then you find another tower, this one collapsed. A mess of branches and broken ropes. A fire pit nearby, long cold. Someone else passed this way once. Maybe weeks ago, maybe years. It's hard to tell out here. The earth reclaims fast. You squat near the pit and stir the ashes with a stick. Charcoal breaks apart easily. No warmth, but you spot something underneath a shard of bone. Clean and pale. Not human. Kangaroo. Maybe wallaby. You're not sure, but it's been cooked. Someone ate here. Someone slept here, and someone left, either by choice or not. You stand, eyes scanning the tree line again. You think of the stories you've heard of people who disappeared out here, not because of violence, but because the land simply swallowed them. A missed turn, a night too cold, a bite too slow to treat, and they were gone. No graves, no markers, just gone. You've never feared ghosts, but this place doesn't make them. It absorbs them. You move again, toward the west, where the ground rises slightly and the air feels thinner. You hope for wind, for a view, for anything that tells you the next few hours won't be worse than the last. You wrap your bark shoes tighter, adjust the cloth across your forehead, and step forward. Above, the hawk still circles unbothered, unreadable. You envy that. The ease, the distance. You remember now what the old tracker told you before you left. Don't try to conquer the bush. It doesn't even notice you're here. At the time, it felt like mysticism. Now, it feels like warning. You aren't the main character here. You're not even a guest. You're a ripple in a puddle. And when you're gone, the surface goes flat again. You walk quietly, slowly, listening to the hush between tree limbs. A breeze picks up. You stop to feel it. And somewhere behind you, maybe far, maybe near, there's a sound. Not a splash this time. Not a rustle. A breath. You freeze. Your pulse quickens. You wait. The sound doesn't come again. But you know better than to assume you imagined it. You tighten your grip on your walking stick. Not for defense, but balance. You keep moving. The sun dips a little in the sky. Not much, but enough to remind you night's coming again. And this time, you don't have a tower. As afternoon leans into evening, the light thickens, turning everything bronze and shadowed like a faded memory. You move slower now, not just from fatigue, but because the land is no longer simply a background. It's a stage with too many traps in the wings. The heat is ebbing, but the tension rises. You've learned by now that dusk isn't a transition, it's an announcement. The day things are going to bed, and the night things are waking up. You pause near a clearing where the earth turns pale with the old ash and fine dust. And you know this place was once a camp, not a village, not a permanent site, just a pause in someone else's journey. You can still smell faint traces of old smoke clinging to the leaves, even though no fire's been lit here in weeks. It's quiet, but not empty. You feel it in the way your skin tightens. This place is being watched, not necessarily by something hostile, but something interested, and that's enough. You crouch and start gathering what you need: sticks, bark, dry grass. Not for shelter, but for smoke. That's the trick out here. Fire doesn't just warm you, it shields you from eyes that don't blink. And tonight, the air is damp enough that the smoke might linger. You remember what you were told: spiders hate it, mosquitoes avoid it, and sometimes, if the wind's right, the snakes slither elsewhere. You don't build a big fire, just a small one, coaxed gently into life. Not for cooking, but for negotiating. You toss in bundles of old spider silk and dried herbs, bush medicine. They call it not the kind you drink, but the kind you breathe. The scent rises in coils, bitter and clean, wrapping around your body like a second skin. One mainstream fact: Aboriginal Australians use smoke not just as a tool, but as ceremony, for cleansing, for guidance, for transitions between places both physical and spiritual. Smoke was a language, a signal. It told the land you were here. It told the creatures that you knew the rules, but more practically, it told the insects to go away. Out here, Bugs aren't just an annoyance. They're a hazard. Some bite, some lay eggs, some simply drive you mad with their persistence. Smoke doesn't solve the problem, but it slows it down, and that might be all you need. You fan the smoke around your body, into your shoes, across your arms. You wave it over your bedding, just a roll of grass and cloth, and then you watch it drift upward. Above you, the sky's turning indigo, and stars are beginning to poke through like pinholes in a curtain. You hear the first chirps of nocturnal insects and the low hum of something larger, maybe a frog, maybe not. This is the hour of guessing. Every sound has a dozen meanings. A snap could be a twig breaking or a jaw closing. A whisper of grass could be wind or a tail. You don't ask questions out loud. You just listen. A quirky detail in some regions. Bundles of crushed spider webs were rolled tight and burned slowly like incense, not just to repel pests, but to mask human scent. The belief was that certain animals, snakes, for instance, could track breath before they tracked movement. So smoke wasn't just about visibility, it was camouflage. A soft veil between you and what would rather you weren't here. You add another bundle to your fire, careful not to overfeed it. Too much smoke draws attention, too little, and you might as well sleep naked in a nest of ticks. Historians still argue whether spider silk was harvested intentionally or simply scraped up in passing. Some oral traditions suggest children were taught to collect it delicately with sticks or leaves, storing it in bark bowls. Others say it was incidental, just part of the bush detritus that got used because it was there. Either way, when you're sitting in the dark with webs burning at your feet and the smell of eucalyptus wrapping your shoulders, you don't really care about the origin story. You care that the spiders stay out of your ear tonight. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to rest your vision. The firelight dances on the inside of your eyelids. You count your breaths, 10 in, 10 out. Your body is learning to shut down in pieces. First the shoulders, then the jaw, then the muscles behind your eyes. Your legs ache, but in a distant way now, like they belong to someone else. You feel the beginnings of sleep around the edges of your mind, soft, hesitant, like a shy animal approaching camp. But then a pop in the fire snaps you back. Not fear, just habit. You can't afford deep sleep. Not yet. A breeze stirs. You welcome it, brief relief from the sticky air and the prickling sense that something might be crawling across your shoulder blades. But the breeze brings new sounds. Leaves rustling overhead, a low moan from a tree settling in the cooling air. You shift to face the wind, letting the smoke push outward like a slow-moving shield. The scent clings to you, earthy and sharp. Your nose itches. You resist scratching. That's how spiders win. You think, briefly, about home, wherever that is. A place with walls, with glass windows, with clean socks. You smile at the absurdity. Socks. What a luxury. What a laughable extravagance. Here, a clean sock would be a sacred object. Something you'd trade for food or water or a full night's sleep. Instead, you've got bark strips and cloth that smells like swamp and campfire. But it holds your feet together. And out here, that's love. You lie down, careful to keep one arm draped across your pouch, your stick within reach. The fire pops again, but softer this time, like it knows you're trying to let go. You close your eyes and let the darkness settle in fully. Around you, the bush breathes. A slow inhale, a long exhale. Something small scampers nearby, too light to be trouble. Probably a bandicoot, or a lie you're telling yourself so you can sleep. Either way, you don't open your eyes. You drift, not into dreams, but into a kind of floating, the place between thoughts. You feel your heartbeat in your throat, your fingers twitch, and through it all, the smoke rises, carrying your scent, your fear, and your exhaustion into the canopy above. Maybe it's enough to fool what's watching, maybe it's not, but you've done all you can. The rest belongs to the night. The sun hasn't risen yet, but something else has the birds. Not the gentle chorus you might expect, but the harsh, metallic screeches of emus echoing through the bush like war horns played through rusted pipes. You jolt upright, heart racing, before your brain catches up and reminds you it's just the birds again. Just the tall, prehistoric, feathered nightmares that patrol the land like they own it, because, in a way, they do. Emus aren't the dainty, curious creatures you see in children's books. They're fast, moody, and built like a linebacker with claws. And right now, two of them are picking their way through the clearing about 50 meters from your camp, pecking at roots, kicking at dirt, and occasionally pausing to glare at nothing, or maybe at you. You lie still, barely breathing, the fading warmth of your fire your only shield. You watch them move, shoulders hunched, legs like pistons, heads twitching like they're hearing thoughts instead of sounds. And then one suddenly bolts, not away, but toward something invisible in the grass, legs pounding the earth in a thudding rhythm that makes your ribs vibrate. The other follows, because of course it does, and within seconds, they're gone, just two bursts of angry feathers and dust. You exhale, slowly. That's the thing about emus. They're unpredictable, uninterested in you one moment, and fully prepared to chase you across the bush the next, if you look at them funny. And you, unfortunately, always look like a threat to something out here. One mainstream fact that often gets buried under the chuckles and memes: emus are formidable survivors. Capable of sprinting up to 50 kilometers per hour, they've adapted brilliantly to the harshest environments, feeding on roots, insects, berries, anything they can find. Some Aboriginal groups respected them not just as game, but as guides watch where the emus go. And you might find water or food. Follow too closely, though, and they might decide to chase you instead. Not out of fear, out of sheer, baffling bird spite. A quirky detail some stories tell of emus that circled camps for days, not attacking, not fleeing, just watching. Like bored spirits trapped in oversized feathery suits, they'd peer into fires, tilt their heads at sleeping bundles, and wander off only when thoroughly unimpressed. Whether this was myth or just emu behavior is hard to say, but either way, the result was the same people slept with one eye open and didn't joke too loudly about the birds. Historians still debate whether emu sightings were interpreted as omens, messengers of drought or abundance. Some regions considered them sacred, others saw them as meat on legs. The only thing they agreed on, you didn't ignore them, and you certainly didn't provoke them, because when an emu decides to charge, you have exactly two options: climb something, or regret your choices. You pack up your things, careful not to leave anything that smells like food. Not that you have much, just a few strips of root, a pouch of dried tubers, and the last gulp of water. Your bark shoes are holding up, though one is flaking badly at the toe. You tighten the wrap with a length of sinew and check your path again. The sun's coming now, slow and low, turning the world gold and red, like it's trying to apologize for everything it did yesterday. You don't forgive it, not yet. You start walking, following the flattened grasses where the emus ran. It's not the smartest path, they don't care about terrain the way you do, but it's a visible one. And right now, anything that saves you energy is a gift. Your legs feel like logs. Your shoulders ache from carrying nothing but tension. And every breath tastes like dust and yesterday's fire. But you're still moving, still part of the story. The emu trail leads you through the low scrub, past the skeleton of a tree that lightning split years ago. The burn marks still scrawl up its trunk, black veins in pale bark. You pause to touch it, half expecting heat, but it's cold now, dead, like a monument to a forgotten war between sky and land. You press your forehead against it, just for a moment, letting the coolness ground you. Then you keep walking. You spot a wedge-tailed eagle circling far overhead, and you know that's not random. They don't circle for fun. They circle for weakness, for movement, for things that stop moving. You wave a hand, half greeting, half defiance. Not today. You think, not yet. The eagle doesn't care. It just glides higher, letting the air carry it somewhere you'll never reach. Around mid-morning, you reach a patch of land that feels different, softer. The plants here are greener, the insects louder, and the air smells of mud and something faintly sweet. You crouch and touch the ground, damp. You found another water source, probably shallow, probably temporary, but real. You dig a little, and soon you've got a palmful of water so muddy it looks like soup. Still, it's wet. You filter it through cloth, let it sit, and drink slowly, carefully. It tastes like leaves and dirt and salvation. Near the edge of this soft patch, you find a series of strange indentations round, deep, almost like hoof prints, but too wide, too flat. You stare at them, puzzled, until the realization clicks. Cassowary? You didn't think they roamed this far, but maybe they do. Or maybe it was just one, out of place, wandering like you. Either way, it's not the kind of bird you want to bump into. If emus are bouncers, cassowaries are assassins. You move on, a little faster now, your senses tuned to any sudden rustle. You climb a low ridge as the sun climbs higher, and from the top, you finally see it, a shimmering line on the horizon, a real waterhole, maybe 2 hours away. You smile, not because you're saved, but because you finally have a destination that isn't just a guess. You descend slowly, already planning your route, already preparing for whatever shares that hole with you: eels, crocs, wallabies, or worse. But for now, your biggest threat has retreated. The birds are gone. The giant feathery nightmares have stomped off into the bush to menace someone else or chase wind. And you're still here, barefoot in bark, sweating through your shirt, wondering what fresh absurdity the next bend will bring. But you're alive, and that's enough for now. By the time you reach the edge of the waterhole, the sun has begun to blister the tops of your shoulders and the backs of your knees, painting you in the kind of heat that makes your breath come out in silent gasps. The shimmering line you saw from the ridge is real barely, but it's there. A shallow basin carved into the clay, rimmed with muddy prints and surrounded by thorny shrubs that bristle like they're defending treasure. The water is stagnant, opaque, and smells faintly of rot and minerals, but your body doesn't care. It sees wetness. It wants it, but you don't move too quickly. Not here. You know better now. You've learned that waterholes aren't gifts, they're battlegrounds. Every animal out here comes here to drink, to bathe, to hide, to stalk, and some don't leave. You crouch near the edge and scan the surface. Nothing stirs, no bubbles, no ripples, no eyes, but you don't believe it. You toss a stick into the shallows and watch it float, unmoving, still. You wait, and after a long pause, you see it. Just a blink of light under the surface. A flicker, a shift in color, then gone. You step back slowly, not in fear, but in respect. Something's in there. Maybe a croc, maybe a long-necked turtle, maybe just an eel tracing circles in the mud. Doesn't matter. You don't plan to step in. You plan to use what you must and leave before curiosity becomes contact. Your answer lies in the grayish clay that rims the hole like a scab. You've seen this before, rubbed across faces, arms, even torsos. A body shield? You crouch low and scoop up a handful, cool and soft in your palm. It smells like old earth and metal, like something buried too long and pulled up too soon. You smear it across your arms, then your chest, your legs, your face. The clay dries quickly in the sun, tightening your skin like armor. This isn't about beauty. This is about survival. Mainstream fat clay was used across the continent not just for ceremonial body paint, but for functional protection against insects, sun, and heat. A thin layer could cool the body, slow evaporation, and form a barrier between flesh and biting pests. And if it cracked and flaked off, it could be reapplied. The clay didn't just protect, it told stories. The patterns worn during hunting, dancing, or traveling signaled where you were from, what you were doing, and whether you were welcome. Your pattern right now, pure desperation, no flair, just streaks and smears and patches that say, I am trying to stay alive. Quirky details, some clay mixtures were intentionally infused with crushed leaves or ash to strengthen their effect or carry a scent that masked human sweat. You've heard whispers of elders mixing the dung of certain herbivores into the clay, to create a camouflage smell that fooled predators. You don't know if you believe that, but standing here, covered in drying mud and your own salt, you can see the logic. Smelling like something less appetizing than you are is a very reasonable goal. Historians still debate whether clay armor was used deliberately in warfare or only in practical survival. Rock art and oral stories suggest both. Some images show warriors streaked with pale markings that may have had dual meanings: intimidation for enemies, but also insect repellent in mosquito-heavy regions. Function and form, one never wasted effort in the bush. If something could mean two things, it did. You crouch again and look into the water, still no movement. You fill your bark bowl slowly, carefully avoiding disturbance. The water smells thick, not ideal, but boilable. You tuck it away in your pouch and back off, never turning your back on the water. That's another lesson you've absorbed. Nothing is ever done watching you, even when it looks still. Especially when it looks still. With clay caked across your body and enough water to keep your mouth from gluing shut, you retreat from the water hole. You walk at a side angle, never in a straight line, never too fast. You don't want to look like prey, or worse, like you're hiding something. You duck beneath the shrubs that claw at your shoulders and head toward a ridge where wind stirs the trees just enough to make you feel like you're not alone in the good way. This time, you pause beneath the tree with gnarled roots exposed like skeletal fingers and sit. You let the clay dry. It cracks around your joints, flakes off your arms, but enough remains. You can feel the temperature difference. Your sweat doesn't evaporate. It lingers, cool beneath the armor. You scratch absent-mindedly at your shin and watch a fly land on your knee, then slide off like it's unsure you're alive. That's a small victory. You remember a story told in a nighttime hush beside another fire, how a hunter once coated himself head to toe in white clay, including his hair and teeth, and stood motionless for an entire night to confuse a pack of dingoes. They circled him, sniffed him, even brushed against his legs, but they never attacked. Why? Because they didn't see a man. They saw something else, something unfamiliar, something not in their mental menu. And by the time dawn broke, the hunter was still standing, still breathing, and the dingoes were gone. You don't know if it's true, but it sounds true, which, out here, is almost more important. You gather your things again. Your shoes are cracked but intact. The wrapping on your right ankle is slipping, so you retie it with the patience of someone who knows that 10 extra seconds now might save an hour of limping later. The fire you'll need tonight is already in your mind: how to build it small, what to burn, where to place the smoke. Your thoughts move ahead of your body now, preparing camp before your feet arrive. You walk back to the trail, such as it is a faint crease in the grass, a shadow where other shadows don't fall. You're not following a map, you're following instinct, and that's new. You realize it slowly. You're no longer entirely surviving like an outsider. You're starting to think like this land wants you to think, without haste, without assumption, and with a deep understanding that every step must mean something. The wind picks up again, curling around your shoulders like a warning or an embrace, you can't tell which. But it brings with it a scent, smoke, not yours, not from your little bundles, real fire, far off, but close enough that your body stiffens. Someone else is out here, or something that knows how to burn. You pause, heart thrumming. The clay mask tightens on your face like a second expression. You listen, nothing but birds and breeze. Still, you change direction, veering north, toward higher ground, better view, better chance. And as you walk, you feel the clay begin to crack in wider plates. Your skin underneath is damp, aching, alive. Every inch of you is sore, but somehow stronger. You've covered your body in earth. You've stared into a still pool and resisted the urge to trust it. You've walked into a place the land did not ask you to come and left, without demanding more than it gave. And tonight, when the stars return and the wind sings low across the trees, you'll build another fire, small, smoky, smart, and you'll sleep not like a stranger anymore, but like a quiet guest, uninvited, maybe, but tolerated. By evening, the clay has mostly flaked off your skin. leaving faint gray smudges that cling in the hollows of your elbows and behind your knees like ghost stains, soft as old memories. Your muscles ache in a way that feels earned now, not suffered. The sun is sinking, slanting light through the gum trees like golden blades, and the shadows fall long and lean across the dirt. You've chosen your next camp spot carefully, a gentle slope just above a dry creek bed, where wind can travel through but predators are less likely to climb. There's shelter from the south, a decent view to the west, and enough firewood to last a night. But before you rest, there's the matter of food. You haven't eaten properly in 2 days, and the roots in your pouch have gone soft with moisture and fatigue. You need protein, something alive, or something that used to be. That's when you start digging, not for meat exactly, but for grubs. The earth is soft near the base of a fallen tree, its wood silvered by age and hollowed by time. You kneel beside it and begin to prod the base with a sharpened stick, prying gently into the roots. And there it is, the unmistakable squish of something moving in wet wood. You dig faster, scraping back bark, and soon you spotted a thick, pale, writhing mass the size of your thumb. A witchetty grub, fat, blind, defenseless. Dinner. Mainstream fact, the witchetty grub has been a staple of traditional indigenous diets for millennia. High in protein and fat, it's not just edible, it's nutritious, usually eaten raw or lightly roasted over coals. It was a reliable source of energy in a landscape that often gave nothing easily. The taste nutty. Some say eggy, others claim. But taste doesn't matter when your body is buzzing from lack of sustenance and your limbs are beginning to tremble. You find 3 grubs total. Not enough to call it a meal, but enough to calm the alarm bells ringing in your bloodstream. You skewer them on a twig and hold them over your new fire, small and smoky. Like before, the smell that rises isn't unpleasant. A little like roasting almonds, with a faint undertone of something earthy and wet. They pop softly as they cook, fat sizzling down the stick into the fire. When you eat them, there's no ceremony. You chew quickly, not letting your tongue argue. They go down easily, sliding into your stomach like warm, weird reassurance. You feel better almost immediately. Not full, not comfortable, but better. A quirky detail not many outside Australia know in some regions. Witchetty grubs weren't just food, they were medicine, believed to cool the body, soothe internal burns, even heal ulcers. Their fats were used as balm on cracked lips or rubbed into wounds to encourage healing. Elders taught children not just how to find them, but how to thank the land when they did. You murmur something, half habit, half hope, just a soft breath of gratitude into the fire. Not a prayer, exactly. More like a whisper to the dirt. Historians still argue whether certain tribes specialized in grub foraging seasonally, or if it was always a backup food in lean times. Evidence suggests both. Some painted them in cave art, often near water or trees, perhaps indicating abundance. Others left only middens, heaps of discarded shells and bones where grubs were part of the meal but not the focus. Regardless, they were a survival staple, and right now, they're your lifeline. As the fire settles into coals, you stretch out your limbs and settle back against a sloped root. The stars return, brighter than ever, and the moon is still just a sliver more suggestion than shape. Night creatures begin their chorus again. You recognize the click of frogs, the distant bark of something canine, and the high chitter of possums arguing in the treetops. It's not exactly relaxing, but it's familiar now. A kind of rough lullaby. You shift, listening, not just with your ears, but with your skin, your breath. The bush teaches you to hear differently. Then an itch, not a metaphorical one, a literal one, on your ankle. You scratch absently, then more urgently, another on your wrist. You sit up and look, tiny red dots, raised, swelling slightly. You curse under your breath quietly, but sincerely, mosquitoes, or something like them. They've found you. Again, you reach for your pouch and pull out a small lump of crushed leaves wrapped in cloth. You unroll it carefully. Inside is a paste dark green, bitter smelling, and oily. You smear it across the bites, then dab it on your neck, your arms, the backs of your knees. The stinging eases, slightly. The concoction is bush medicine made from tea tree, eucalyptus, and ash. One of the elders gave it to you with a grunt and a nod, as if handing over a secret you hadn't earned yet. You're grateful now. This paste won't stop the bugs, but it'll make your skin a little less appetizing. Maybe. Nothing out here works perfectly. Everything's a trade. Less sting, more smell, less bite, more camouflage. You're a walking bundle of compromises, and just as you begin to relax again, you hear something new, a rustling. Not the scampering of a possum, not the slither of a snake, something heavier, slow, rhythmic. You freeze, heartbeat thudding. You reach for your stick, grip it tightly, and peer into the dark. The sound stops, then resumes. Closer. You don't breathe. Don't blink. Then a shape appears low to the ground, wide-bodied, moving deliberately through the underbrush. A wombat. You exhale in a mixture of relief and something close to embarrassment. The wombat shuffles past your camp like a disgruntled neighbor, ignoring you entirely. Its body is barrel-shaped, its legs stout, and its expression permanently unimpressed. It pauses, sniffs once, then continues on, uninterested. You let your hand fall from the stick and shake your head. This is what survival does. Even the soft things seem like monsters when your nerves are tight enough to snap. The fire has burned low. You feed it one last small stick and roll onto your side. Wrapping your arms around your chest, the night air is cool now, carrying moisture and smoke and the faint tang of roasted grub. Your body settles. Your mind doesn't. It flits and hums and reviews every sound, every shadow, every bite on your ankle. But sleep comes eventually, not like a fall, but like a tide, slow, engulfing, inevitable. You drift into it with the taste of earth still in your mouth, the smell of smoke in your hair, and the soft crunch of clay dust beneath your palm. You're not clean. You're not safe. But you're learning. You're listening. You're becoming, bit by bit, part of the landscape. Not welcome, perhaps, but not immediately rejected either. You wake not to light or sound, but to a sensation, something brushing the edge of your consciousness, like a fingertip tapping just beneath the skin. The fire is out, the coals cold, and the morning hasn't yet committed to being bright. It's that in-between time when shadows have weight and the trees lean just slightly the wrong way. You open your eyes slowly, your body stiff and coated in a thin layer of clay dust and dried sweat. Something's different. You sense it before you hear it, the stillness. Not silence, stillness. No bird calls, no insect buzz. Just breath and space and a tension in the air like a string pulled taut across the treetops. You sit up slowly, the earth beneath your mat crunching softly, and scan the clearing. That's when you see it. At the far edge of the brush, nearly hidden among the leaves, is a small animal. It hasn't seen you yet, or maybe it has and doesn't care. At first glance, it looks like a wallaby, but something feels off. Its posture is too confident, its eyes too fixed. Then it tilts its head, and you see it for what it is, a quokka, a wild one, round, curious, unblinking. Its small mouth curls into what looks almost like a smile. Almost, but you've learned better than to take appearances at face value out here. Cuteness is not safety. Sometimes, it's bait. Mainstream fat quokkas are often called the world's happiest animal, thanks to the natural shape of their mouths and their seemingly placid expressions. But that expression is evolutionary, not emotional. It doesn't mean they're friendly, and certainly not when food is involved. Quokkas are opportunists, smart, fast, and when it suits them, bold. They've been known to sneak into camps, steal dried roots, and vanish with supplies before the humans knew they were gone. You watch this one as it inches closer to your gear, nose twitching, fur glistening faintly with morning dew. You stay still, letting your breath shallow. There's no need to spook it yet. It steps forward, one tiny paw at a time, movements rehearsed and careful. It's not afraid of you. That much is clear. It's done this before, probably many times, maybe even successfully. You watch it nudge your pack with its snout, sniffing for something worth the effort. And then it does something that stops you cold. It looks directly at you and doesn't move. That fake smile still curling its mouth, its black eyes flat and unreadable. And then, slowly, it sits, a quirky detail most people never hear in certain regions. Elders taught that quokkas, despite their harmless appearance, were trickster spirits. Not evil, not dangerous, but not to be underestimated. They were said to bring distraction, to lead travelers slightly off course, to lure children toward unsafe places with their charm, a minor test of awareness. If you paid attention, you stayed safe. If not, you followed the wrong face into the wrong bush and didn't return. Whether you believe it or not, it's enough to make you rethink calling it adorable. Historians still debate whether the trickster quokka was a regional myth or part of a larger cultural narrative about deceptive appearances. In the oral traditions of some coastal groups, the smiling marsupials were never hunted, not because they were sacred, but because they were considered warnings in disguise, harmless in look, cunning in behavior, a reminder to watch the small things, the too easy things. You think about that now as you slowly reach toward your pack, eyes locked with the creatures. The moment you shift, it moves fast. In a blur of fur and muscle, it dashes toward the bush, something clutched in its tiny mouth. You leap up, adrenaline spiking, and sprint after it instinctively, ducking under branches, thorns clawing at your arms, feet pounding dry leaves and hidden roots. You're faster than it, but not by much. It darts left, then right, and you nearly twist your ankle, turning to follow. You crash through a thicket and skid to a halt in a clearing. Panting, the quack is gone. So is your pouch. You stand there for a moment, hands on your knees, breath tearing through your throat. Then you start to laugh. Not loud, not long. Just a dry, cracked sound that escapes because what else can you do? You've just been robbed by something the size of a teapot, and it took your pouch, your food, your root paste, your last real resource. You turn in a slow circle, eyes scanning for movement, but there's nothing, just trees, dust, and somewhere out there, a very smug little mammal disappearing with your dinner. You retrace your steps, slower now, inspecting the damage, a few cuts on your legs, a torn seam on your bark shoe, and a sense of defeat sitting deep in your chest. But you know better than to stay bitter. The bush doesn't reward emotion, it rewards action. You make it back to your camp and sit heavily by the remains of the fire, sifting through what's left, a few twigs, your walking stick, a torn strip of cloth. That's it. You exhale, lean back against the tree, and close your eyes. After a while, hunger dulls into background noise, the kind that wraps around your ribs instead of stabbing into them. You need a new plan, not for escape, not for rescue, for continuation. You rise again and check the trail if the quokka ran that way. Maybe it dropped something, or maybe it led you somewhere useful. You follow the path in reverse, scanning the dirt for signs, and there, nestled in the crook of two rocks, you find a strip of root, yours, chewed on, but intact. A gift, a discard doesn't matter. You pocket it. You look around. The bush here is thicker, greener. You hear water, faint, but close. You move toward it carefully, stepping softly now, alert, and then you see it, a trickle of a stream, no wider than your foot, running between stones, shallow, but fast, clean. You kneel and dip your hands in, the coolness shocking and perfect. You drink, splash your face, feel the dirt melt from your skin. It's not a feast, but it's enough. Enough to keep moving, enough to start again. You sit by the stream, gnawing gently on your recovered root, watching the light play across the water. A dragonfly flits past, iridescent in the sun. You let yourself rest, just for a minute. You close your eyes and imagine the quokka somewhere nearby, watching, still smiling, still hungry, still testing. But that's the lesson, isn't it? Out here, even the smallest things come with teeth, some visible, some hidden. You can't trust the smile, you can't trust the silence, but you can trust your senses, sharpened now by experience, and your instincts, tuned by loss. You're leaner, hungrier, wiser. The bush hasn't welcomed you, but it's stopped pushing back as hard. And for now, that's enough. The stream winds lazily between crooked stones, its whispering trickle the only soft thing you've heard in days. And for a while, you sit beside it, knees drawn up, arms resting atop them, chewing the last of your salvaged root with slow, grinding patience. The water is so clear it feels imaginary, like it doesn't belong here, like it slipped in from another world by mistake. You run your fingers through it, letting the current pull away the grime from your palms, watching bits of old clay and sweat and quagga-scented failure drift downstream. For a moment, the illusion of peace holds. Then your jaw tightens, because peace is never free in this place. Your body may be resting, but your ears still scan, your eyes still twitch, and some primitive part of you keeps its grip on the stick at your side. Rest is a luxury you've learned to rent by the minute, and the rent's always rising. The air is warmer here, but not in the burning way. It's damp, humid, the kind that makes your clothes cling and your breath feel thick. Around you, the vegetation changes subtly greener, denser, with ferns unrolling like tongues from the base of moss-covered rocks. You've entered a different zone, something semi-tropical. Perhaps a microclimate hidden in a bend of land that cradles just enough moisture to bloom. It's beautiful, yes, but also more dangerous. More life means more eyes, more teeth, more things that crawl and sting and hiss from beneath glossy leaves. You take another sip from the stream, fill your bark cup, and rise carefully. The weight of water reassuring, but also precarious. You've lost enough supplies to know never hoard, never rush, never assume the next source is waiting. As you climb a short slope, your foot catches on something hard just beneath the leaf litter. You pause, bend down, and brush it clear. A stone, smooth, flat, blackened on one side. Firestone. You've seen these before, used to start sparks, shaped by hands long gone. This wasn't dropped by accident. Someone camped here, maybe a long time ago, maybe not. You glance around. No structures, no tools, but a faint circular depression in the dirt tells you where a fire once sat. You step back respectfully. This was someone's rest, their story. You're passing through, no need to leave traces. You adjust your pack and keep walking, each step softer than the last. One mainstream fact, Aboriginal Australians used fire not just for cooking, but for land management, what's now called fire stick farming. Controlled burns cleared undergrowth, encouraged new plant life, and created open corridors for hunting. Fire was not destruction, it was a scalpel, and it left behind tools like this firestone, waiting quietly in the soil, forgotten but still sharp. You carry the stone for a few minutes, just feeling its weight, then place it gently on a nearby rock as you pass, like returning a borrowed thought. A quirky detail. Some fire starters were passed down through families for generations, not because they were rare, but because they held memory. The surface would wear smooth from hundreds of strikes, the edges chipped just so, like fingerprints. In some communities, fire was believed to remember the hands that made it. To strike a spark was to call back every fire that came before. You think of that now, your own tiny flames flickering in memory smoke, rising from past nights, curling into nothing. Historians still argue whether fire use was purely functional or deeply spiritual. Most likely, it was both. As with so many things here, the line between tool and ritual blurs. Fire to cook, fire to guide, fire to cleanse, fire to speak, and always, fire to survive. You think of your little campfires, your smoke bundles, the dancing shadows that kept you sane when the bush pressed too close. You're not a fire maker in any ceremonial sense, but you're a firekeeper now. In the quiet, desperate way of anyone trying to last another night, the path narrows again, then vanishes. You push through vines and low branches, feeling the moisture rise, and then your foot sinks. Not far, just a few inches, but enough. You freeze, heart punching your ribs. You shift your weight back slowly, slowly, until you're free. You crouch and look, Mud, deep, sticky, dark as ink. You were 2 steps from a bog, maybe worse. You touch it lightly, cold, slick, the kind that swallows. You move away fast but quiet, heart still thumping. Another lesson learned. Water gives life. It also hides traps. You skirt the edge of the wetland, noting animal tracks, some bird-like, some hoofed, and one that makes you stop. A clawed print, long and narrow. Reptilian, maybe monitor lizard, maybe something with a longer name and a nastier temper. You move faster. Up ahead, the trees open slightly, and you find yourself looking down into a shallow basin, ringed by pale rocks. In the center, a patch of wildflowers blooms gold, red, violet, bursting from the earth like a secret garden. You stare, surprised, not just by the color, but by the timing. This far in, this deep in the survival mindset, beauty feels like a hallucination. You step closer, half smiling, then stop again, because the flowers are untouched. No trampled petals, no bent stems, no signs of animals passing through, which means they're either poisonous or sacred. You crouch, eyes scanning the plants, no smell, no hum of bees, nothing feeding here. You don't touch them, you don't step closer, you just watch, quietly, letting the color soak into your vision like something forgotten. In another world, maybe you'd pick one, tuck it behind an ear, offer it to a child, but here, now, in this place, you just nod and move on. You climb a ridge to the north and stop to rest beneath a sandstone overhang. The wind up here carries dust and the scent of something distant, smoke again? Maybe, or just your memory playing tricks. The land plays with time like that. You sit in the shade, chewing a bitter leaf to dull your thirst, staring out across a sea of trees, every branch a story, every shadow a name. You don't speak, there's no one to hear it, but you think of all the people who've passed through this place before you, some who left marks, others who left none. And in that moment, something shifts, not in the air, not in the bush, but in you. You realize you've stopped counting the days. You've stopped measuring distance in miles. You've started measuring it in footsteps, in how your breath changes, in how long it takes for the sun to cross the space between your shoulder and your shadow. You're not navigating anymore. You're absorbing. Even the bugs on your arms feel less like enemies and more like reminders. You're still edible. You're still here. And somehow, despite the heat, the hunger, the loss, the theft, the mud, you're still walking. Not because you're strong, not because you're wise, but because something in you refuses to stop. Maybe stubbornness, maybe instinct, maybe some quiet thread of will you didn't know was sewn into your bones until now. You close your eyes, letting the wind press its rough fingers into your scalp, and you whisper the truth the bush has been telling you from the start. Survival isn't about beating the land. It's about letting the land reshape you into someone who belongs here, even if just a little. You descend the ridge as the light begins to sharpen again. That harsh midday angle slicing through the bush in pale beams that show everything and hide nothing. The wind has died down. The world feels exposed, raw, like it's waiting for something to happen. And as you step carefully over a patch of cracked red earth, you begin to notice a shift beneath your feet. The ground is harder here, more brittle. You pause, crouch, and touch it with your palm. Warm. Yes, but more than that. It flakes, crumbles in layers like old pastry. You dig gently and find a thin crust over soft, damp soil beneath. Odd. Too damp for the dryness of the air. You sniff the earth and catch a hint of rot. Then you see it a trickle, barely visible, curling through the ground like a buried thread of ink. Water, but not from above, from within. A spring, maybe, or something else entirely. And you realize you're standing near one of the most dangerous blessings this land can offer, subsurface moisture hidden beneath false ground. You step back, slowly, because the earth that holds water can also give way without warning. You circle wide, keeping the cracked crust to your left, and scan for more signs. And that's when you notice a hollow depression. Not deep, but smooth too smooth for random erosion. Like something once lay here, slept here, died here, or all three. You crouch and brush the edge with your fingers, careful not to press down. It's soft, recent. The memory of movement lingers in the shape of it. You don't know what made it. You don't want to. You rise and move on. Faster now. Mainstream fact parts of Australia are crisscrossed with dry creek beds and underground aquifers that vanish and reappear depending on the whims of rain and fault lines. What looks like desert can become a swamp in an hour, and what looks like safe ground can swallow you before you have time to shout. Aboriginal trackers learned to read these signs over generations. How a certain plant's tilt might reveal hidden water, or how the angle of a crack in clay signals depth beneath. You have no such training, just instinct. An instinct, while often late, is rarely wrong when it finally speaks. You pass another patch of curling grass, yellow at the tips, and catch a flash of movement, something darting through the undergrowth ahead. Low, fast, not a kangaroo, not a possum. Too smooth. You freeze, heart racing, and wait. Silence. Then a rustle, and you see it. A monitor lizard, goanna, nearly 4 feet long, with skin like rippled leather and claws like dried bone. It stops, lifts its head, flicks its tongue once. You don't move. Neither does it. The air between you feels charged, like a dare held between clenched teeth. Then it blinks slow, lazy, and turns, vanishing into the ferns like it was never there. You breathe again, only then realizing how tightly you'd been holding your muscles. A quirky detail about goannas in some traditions. They were thought to be messengers, silent observers who appeared when something important was about to change. They were rarely hunted, partly out of respect, partly because they were clever, fast, and nearly impossible to corner unless you knew their burrows. Their flesh was fatty and rich, their tails considered delicacies, but you're not thinking about food now. You're thinking about why it stopped to look at you, and why it left. Not out of fear, but maybe as if it had finished what it came to do. Historians still argue whether goannas were bred into ritual cycles, appearing in dreaming stories not just as animals, but as ancestors. Their tracks, too, were sacred in places sometimes marked, sometimes followed, sometimes avoided entirely. You wonder if you've stepped onto such a path, and if so, whether you're allowed to be here. The land, as always, doesn't answer, but it doesn't push you away either. You push forward, careful with every step. The ground remains strange, soft in places, brittle in others. Then the terrain changes again. You reach a dry creek bed, narrow but deep, carved into the land like a gash. The walls are steep, and the bottom is littered with smooth stones, sun-bleached and heat-humming. You slide down, boots scraping against dust and root, landing hard but upright. Here, in the shade of the banks, the air is different, cooler, damp. You find a flat rock and sit, letting the heat drain from your skin into the stone. You drink slowly from your bark cup, half full, and think about what comes next. You scan the stone-littered bed for clues, animal tracks, faint, some bird, probably, a snake's slither, maybe, and there on the far side a series of marks, shallow but deliberate, not scratches, symbols, painted in ochre long ago. They've faded, nearly dust now, but you can see the echo of lines, curves, a circle broken at one edge. You reach toward it, fingers hovering just above the stone, and stop. This is not yours to touch. You back away, head bowed not in reverence exactly, but in recognition. Something happened here. Maybe a warning, maybe a map. You leave it be. Climbing out of the creek bed is slower. The walls crumble easily, and you have to wedge your toes between roots to pull yourself up. Your arms shake by the time you reach the top, sweat dripping from your chin. You rest only long enough to catch your breath. Then you walk again, forward, always, even if the direction isn't clear. As the afternoon deepens, the world sharpens again, the light turns hard, the shadows shorter. You reach a patch of scorched earth, circular and blackened charcoal shards underfoot, half-burned branches still arranged in what was once a fire structure, a recent camp, maybe days old, maybe more. You crouch, finger the ash, cold, lifeless. You scan for tracks. None. Just the faint indentation of something heavy, having once been here. A swag. A body. You don't know. You don't linger. The quiet thickens again. No birds, no frogs. Just wind sliding through dry bark. Then another sound. Sharp, sudden. A footstep. No. A stone dislodged. You crouch instantly. Breath held. Eyes darting. But there's nothing. Just your heart pounding too close to your ears. You wait. Listen. The silence continues. And somehow, that's worse. You rise slowly and walk on, but your shoulders remain tight, your pace more cautious. Eventually, the land opens again, a wide clearing, ringed by trees bent inward like they're conspiring. In the center, a ring of stones, not natural, not random. You pause at the edge. Something inside you resists. You don't step into it. You sit instead, just outside, back against a fallen log, and let your legs stretch out into the dirt. You eat a scrap of dried leaf, not because you're hungry, but because chewing gives your nerves something to do. The sun dips lower. Light stretches long and strange. You close your eyes just long enough to see the afterimage of the goanna in your mind, watching, turning, leaving. You don't know what it meant, but you remember it, and that's enough. Another mark on your memory. Another whisper from a land that never raises its voice but still finds ways to be heard. The next morning doesn't arrive so much as unfold quietly, like a sheet being drawn back from a sleeping body. The sky goes pale, then blue, and the bush exhales as if it's been holding its breath through the night. You're already awake. You didn't really sleep, more like you drifted on the edge of unconsciousness. One ear always turned to the underbrush, one eye flickering open at every rustle, but somehow your body feels steadier. You rise slowly, bones creaking, muscles groaning like old rope pulled too tight, and you stretch beneath the low arch of a twisted ironbark tree, watching the light move like liquid across the forest floor. The ring of stone still sits silent behind you, and you don't look back at it as you leave. Whatever that place was, meeting ground, burial site, camp of ghosts, you stepped around it. You didn't disturb it, and that, you suspect, is the only reason you're walking away now, with your shadow still attached. You move through the brush with a kind of practiced quiet now, a rhythm that wasn't there when you first arrived in this brutal stretch of land. Your feet no longer clomp, they place. Your breathing matches the breeze. You don't speak out loud, not even to yourself. There's a knowing now in your bones that silence isn't empty here. It's full of life, full of messages, full of things waiting to be heard. And today, that silence is broken by one sound, the slow, dragging shuffle of scales through dirt. You stop, instantly. Your heart doesn't leap this time. It just waits. You turn your head, slowly, and catch it in your peripheral vision, a snake, long, thick-bodied, black with a sheen of blue where the sunlight kisses it, red-bellied, venomous, but uninterested. It glides past you like a rumor, a living piece of river shadow, neither rushing nor hesitating. You stay motionless, knees bent, arms still, and let it choose its path. It doesn't lift its head. It doesn't test the air with its tongue. It just moves, perfectly indifferent to your existence. And in that indifference, you find something oddly comforting. You're not a threat. You're not prey. You're just another warm shape in a hot landscape. When it's gone, you breathe out through your nose and keep walking. Mainstream fact, the red-bellied black snake, one of Australia's most recognizable species, is less aggressive than its reputation suggests. It prefers flight to fight, striking only when provoked or cornered. Its venom is potent, yes, but rarely fatal with proper treatment. The trick is to avoid startling it and never assume stillness means safety. Most bites come not from aggression, but from surprise. And out here, Surprise is always fatal to something. A lesser known detail. Passed quietly in old stories, snakes are said to carry memories not their own, but the land's, the way they move across it, the way they coil in the same tree hollow year after year, the way their paths follow water even when no surface sign remains. In some traditions, to see a snake was to be reminded that you are being watched not by a creature, but by the earth itself, not judged, just observed. You carry that thought with you now. As you pass the spot where the snake disappeared, your feet soft on the soil, the day grows hotter, faster than usual. No breeze, no birdsong, just the hum of flies and the throb of distant insects that sound mechanical in their persistence. The air feels like it's pressing in on your skin, tightening your joints, slowing your thoughts. You rest in the shade of a leaning gum tree, peeling away a strip of bark and chewing it to draw out moisture. It tastes bitter, but you swallow anyway. You think of water, but you're low again. 2 sips left in your bark flask. Enough for an emergency, but not for comfort. And that's when you remember something half heard, half felt. A story about water that isn't visible. You scan the ground, searching for a certain type of tree. A ghost gum, pale bark, tall, slender, found only where the groundwater runs close beneath the surface. You rise and start moving. Not fast, but with intent. After half an hour, you find one standing proud in the middle of a sunlit clearing, its bark nearly white against the dark greens of the bush around it. You kneel at its base and feel the soil. Dry on top, yes, but softer underneath. You dig, hands first, then with a flat stone. After 6 inches, the dirt turns darker, then damp. You smile, not wide, not foolish, just a quiet stretch of the mouth that says not yet dead. You build a small depression and let the water seep in, slowly, reluctantly, but it's there. You gather it with cupped hands, filter it through cloth, and drink. It tastes earthy, but it's clean enough. You refill your bark flask and splash the rest on your face, neck, shoulders. The chill shocks your nerves awake. The bush smells different now, sharper, richer, like it's breathing with you instead of against you. You rest under the ghost gum, the silence around you no longer threatening but companionable. You eat a scrap of dried root, feeling the sting of it on your tongue, the burn in your throat. You think of food constantly now, not because you're starving, but because your body wants to plan, to secure, to understand. And that's when you notice something half buried near the base of the tree. A piece of carved wood, worn smooth by time. A tool handle, maybe, or a ritual stick. You brush it clean. Examine the faint etching spiraling along its edge. You don't recognize the symbols. You don't need to. You put it back exactly where it was. This isn't yours. Historians still debate whether these markings were language, memory aids, or just artistic expression. But the argument misses the point. Out here, meaning doesn't have to be universal. It just has to be respected. You've learned to read what you can and leave untouched what you can't. You walk again as the sun begins to drop, not yet near the horizon, but leaning toward it. The light turns golden, then amber. The trees cast long fingers across the ground. You find a hollow beneath a low-hanging rock shelf, dry, shaded, protected on 3 sides, a perfect place for camp. You gather kindling. You build your fire low and slow. You crush dried leaves and scatter them into the flame for smoke. You rub clay around your ankles to ward off the bites. You eat the last of your bark-wrapped tubers and save 1 piece, just in case. You whisper thanks to no one in particular, then stretch out on the softest patch of dirt you can find. As the stars return, first a handful, then a riot of them, you lie still, letting their light rest on your skin. You are sore, you are hungry, you are alive. You listen to the bush breathing around you, and for the first time in days, you feel something like peace. Not because the danger is gone, but because you are no longer surprised by it. You expect nothing, and in that, you've begun to belong. The stars wheel slowly overhead as the night deepens, and though your eyes are closed, you can feel their movement not as light, but as a subtle pressure in the air. like the sky itself shifting its weight. You don't sleep, not fully. Sleep in the bush comes in pieces, in shallow layers, like skin that peels back in heat. But you rest, and that's enough. A stillness enters your limbs, not born of peace, but of exhaustion shaped into discipline. Every muscle has learned its place now. Every breath is measured. You lie in your hollow under the rock shelf, fire reduced to embers, your ears tracking the bush's rhythm. The usual clicks and hums return slowly, the frogs, the rustling lizards, the high-pitched whine of something with wings too small to see. The presence of noise, after silence, is its own kind of comfort. It means the larger predators are not nearby. Yet, then, just before dawn, you hear a sound you've not heard before. Not an animal call, not a natural creak, a rhythm, hollow, wooden, slow, a knock, knock, then pause, then again. It comes from the east, beyond the ridge, somewhere between curiosity and warning. You sit up instantly, every hair on your arms rising. It's not close, but it's intentional. Too slow to be a woodpecker, too deliberate to be an accident. You wait, another pause, then silence. No birds call in its wake, no insects resume their song. Whatever it was, it interrupted the bush's language, left a space behind it. You rise before the sun, gathering your few things, the last scrap of tuber, the water flask now half full, your walking stick, worn smooth where your hand grips it. You don't know what the sound was. You don't plan to find out, not directly. You walk west instead, away from the ridge, toward a cluster of hills you spotted yesterday. Hills mean elevation. Elevation means distance from what doesn't want to be understood. As you walk, the world begins to lighten, first the pale indigo of approaching dawn, then that strange violet hush just before the sun. The ground is cooler underfoot now, and the dew clings to the tops of your feet like faint sorrow. Every plant glows faintly in the pre-dawn shimmer, as if the whole bush has been holding its breath all night and is finally exhaling. You don't speak. You haven't spoken in days. Your voice would sound foreign now, even to yourself. One mainstream fact that outsiders rarely understand: the silence of the Australian bush isn't empty. It's patterned. It speaks, it warns, it welcomes. Indigenous trackers can tell when silence is natural and when it's forced. You're starting to hear the difference. The night just past was too quiet in parts, like something large moved nearby and everything else ducked its head. You didn't see it, but that's the point. You weren't supposed to. A strange, rarely told detail in some dreaming stories. The bush itself is said to walk, not the trees, not the ground, but the spirit of the land. It moves like fog, slow and listening. If it finds you still and honest, it lets you pass. If it finds you loud and full of demand, it shows you your shape in reversed footprints, in broken tools, in paths that circle back on themselves. You don't know if that's what you felt last night, but you do know you're moving more quietly today than you ever have. By the time the sun breaks fully above the tree line, you've reached the base of the hills. They're not steep, but they rise steadily, their ridges dusted with boulders and hardy shrubs that cling like stubborn thoughts. You begin the climb, not quickly, but with focus, each step deliberate. You don't speak, you don't pant, you keep your breath deep and steady. Sweat drips into your eyes, and you let it. The sun is higher now, and the heat blooms fast, but you've come to expect this. You're no longer shocked by the sun. You just endure it. Halfway up, you find the remains of a campsite, a ring of rocks, ashes gray with age, a broken stick carved with faded lines. You crouch, no recent use, no scent, just a ghost of someone else's struggle. You leave it undisturbed. Further up, you find a shallow indentation in the rock, full of collected rainwater. Not much, just enough to cup in your hand. Rinse your mouth. You do so without hesitation. You've drunk worse. At the top of the hill, the view stretches wide. The bush rolls out below like a sea frozen mid-wave green. Gold, rust, flickering with shadow. In the distance, A ridge rises higher than the others. To the northwest, you see what might be smoke, curling faintly into the sky. Not fire, not large, but human, or something that behaves like it. You mark the direction in your head. You won't go there, not yet, but it helps to know. You rest again under a rock outcrop, cool stone pressing against your back. Your legs tremble, but not from weakness, from effort stored up, unreleased. You eat nothing. You've learned the sensation of hunger without panic. Hunger now is a shape in your belly, not a fire. It reminds you you're alive, that you still want, still need, still move forward. Then movement, not near, but below. You watch the slope carefully and see a shape dart between trees. Two shapes, small, quick, human. No. Children, maybe no again. Wild dogs, dingoes, pale, lean, silent. You track their path with your eyes. They don't see you. They don't smell you. The wind is on your side, but you remember the stories. Mainstream fact: dingoes are apex predators, intelligent, coordinated, and wary. They rarely attack humans unless sick, starving, or threatened, but packs can size you up over days, testing your patterns, watching how you move, deciding whether you belong. In some areas, they were feared. In others, respected. In a few stories, they were said to guide the lost, or mislead them. Tricksters, judges, family. The quirky detail: in some tribes, the dingo was thought to carry the soul of someone who died far from home. Its cry at night wasn't just a call, it was a lament, a searching. To hear it was to be reminded that not all stories end where they're supposed to. Some just wander, howl, and disappear into the brush. You watch the dingoes until they vanish, then wait longer still. You don't descend yet. The ridge will come, but not now. For now, you lie back against the rock, sun on your face, body aching, and let yourself breathe. You haven't seen another human in what feels like years, though it's probably only been days. You're not sure you miss them. You're not sure you're one of them anymore. Out here, identity thins like worn cloth. What matters is the direction you walk and the silence you keep. You close your eyes, not to sleep, just to rest in the presence of something larger than you, that neither wants your praise nor fears your failure. You're still here, and tonight, if you're lucky, you'll sleep with stars above, smoke in your nose, and nothing closer than the sound of your own pulse. The wind returns just after noon, sweeping in from the east like a lazy apology, dry and rough, but welcome all the same. It flutters the edges of your shirt, stirs the dust at your feet, and whistles faintly through the cracked rocks that crown the ridge you've just begun to descend. You pause at the edge before going down, letting your eyes trace the wide basin that unfolds below an open stretch of land ringed by sparse trees, brush, and something else that stops you cold. Movement, not fast, not close, but deliberate. At first, it looks like just another shape in the bush, one of 1,000 lumpy silhouettes made by logs or termite mounds or sleeping kangaroos. But then it shifts again. A subtle roll of shadow, a glint where sunlight hits something slightly moist. You crouch, squint, heart slowing in preparation for decision, and then you see it clearly: a crocodile, not in water, on land, sunbathing. You remain still, watching. It lies half in shade, half in sunlight, its mouth open slightly, like it's dreaming of food or remembering it. Its tail is coiled in that deceptively lazy S-curve, the kind that looks like rest until it isn't. You count its breath slow, steady, spaced far apart. You glance around. No water nearby, just a shallow dip in the land where floodwater might have passed weeks ago. It must have followed a streambed inland, gotten trapped, or decided this patch of heat was worth claiming. You've never seen one this far from a river, but then again, no one drew a map of this place for you. You move a few steps back, slowly, keeping brush between your body and its line of sight. Mainstream fact: Australian saltwater crocodiles are known for traveling miles inland through waterways. Even after the rains recede, they can survive for months with minimal water, basking in the sun to regulate their body temperature. conserving energy until the next chance at food stumbles by. In some rare cases, they've been spotted in dry season basins, half buried in mud, waiting out the heat like buried statues. A more curious detail, some Aboriginal groups believed crocodiles could smell emotion, specifically fear. They said that a man who walked past without worry would be ignored, but one who doubted himself would be followed. Whether that's true in the biological sense doesn't matter here. Out here, belief is biology. If it makes your hands shake and your feet misstep, it changes your chemistry. It changes your fate. You believe that now, fully. Historians continue to argue whether crocodile encounters shaped migration patterns across the far north, but archaeological remains near flood zones suggest certain waterholes were permanently avoided, wide arcs taken around them, no matter the cost. You understand this deeply now, viscerally. You step wide around the croc's patch, not once looking directly at it again, not because it might see you, but because it already has. You feel its attention in the prickling heat on the back of your neck as you vanish down the far slope. Your shoes, such as they are, begin to give out. The bark has split at the toe, and the sole is no longer tethered to the arch. You rewrap them with strips of cloth torn from your inner pack lining, knotting with fingers that barely bend anymore. The muscles are tight from dehydration, the joints swollen from endless walking, but the repairs hold. You press forward across uneven terrain, dirt cracked into puzzles, stones shaped like teeth, dry twigs that snap and echo far too loudly. An hour passes, then two. You reach a flat stretch that gives your feet a break. Here. The land opens into a long sloping plain studded with scrubby grass and what looks like tall stone pillars. From a distance, they resemble standing rocks, natural formations. But as you approach, you notice patterns, marks, not carvings exactly, but deliberate scratches, rubbed, smoothed by weather, like memory etched into stone and softened by time. You stop before one, palm hovering above its surface. You don't touch, you just observe. This was once something important. You feel it in the arrangement. The stones are spaced not for function, but meaning. They face a certain way. They catch the light at specific angles. Maybe they once marked a gathering ground, or a route, or a promise. You sit beneath one, letting its shadow fall over you, and rest your back against its warmth. The sun has heated the stone all morning, and now it bleeds that heat into your spine, comforting and strange. You eat nothing, drink only a sip, but your body thanks you for the pause. The wind shifts again, now from the north, bringing with it the sharp scent of something scorched, burned grass. Maybe, or wood, not fire. Not yet. Just memory. The bush always smells of something past. You rise again, brushing dust from your legs, and walk between the stones as though moving through a graveyard. You don't speak. You don't break the line of silence they've drawn across this place. You reach the far side and descend into a narrow gully where shadows are thicker and the temperature drops suddenly. It's not just cool. It's cold. Your skin tightens. You pause. Heart suddenly racing for no reason you can name. It's quiet, too quiet. You crouch low, eyes scanning the gully walls, which rise steep and close on either side. No escape if something decides to trap you here. You pick up your pace, breath steady, body low, stick gripped in both hands. At the midpoint of the gully, a shape hangs overhead, a nest, massive, interwoven branches, feathers, bones. You don't look too long. You just keep moving. Something large lives here, or used to, or might return. At last, you emerge on the far side, sunlight wrapping your face like a wet cloth. You blink, heart slowing, and press forward into new terrain. The bush opens again, trees spaced further apart, undergrowth thinning. You feel air move more freely here, light filtering through as if the land is loosening its grip. You see termite mounds in the distance, tall, narrow, red as rust, clustered like sentinels. Some are cracked open, revealing chambers within. You approach one and lay your hand gently on its side, warm, vibrating faintly, alive. A mainstream fact: termites are builders, architects. and providers. Their mounds regulate temperature, protect colonies, and can last generations. Indigenous Australians use them to find food, medicine, and even inspiration for shelter design. They follow the termites to find water-bearing roots and edible fungi. In the dry season, some broke into mounds to retrieve warmth or harvest larvae. The odd truth, some oral traditions spoke of termites as record keepers, that their labyrinths beneath the ground were maps of time, echoing the pathways of ancestors, that to destroy one was to erase a memory. You think of that now, as you press your palm against the mound and whisper a quiet, wordless apology for disturbing it. You find a place to rest near a fallen log as the sun tilts westward. You haven't seen another human for longer than you can count, and strangely, you no longer hope to. Solitude has shifted from fear to fact. You're no longer waiting to be found. You are simply moving, existing, observing, and with every mile, the line between survival and belonging grows thinner. As you close your eyes for a moment, you think not of rescue or food or water, but of the crocodile on dry land, waiting, watching. You feel like that now, out of place, but adapting, not meant to be here, but not entirely wrong either. You're no longer a visitor, you're a presence, and tonight, you'll light another fire, let the smoke climb into the dark, and hope that whatever watches sees you not as prey, not as threat, but as something in between. Night doesn't fall in the bush, it seeps. It begins at your feet, in the way shadows pool around rocks and twist under the shrubs, then climbs your body inch by inch until even your own hands, once sun-reddened and cracked, look like ghosts in the firelight. You've built the flame low again habit now, not hesitation. A ring of carefully spaced coals, dry bark placed for slow burn, smoke rising in thin curls to ward off the night's smaller, hungrier occupants. You sit with your knees drawn up to your chest, spine resting against the remains of the fallen log you found earlier. Your body aches in its usual ways, shoulders stiff from constant vigilance, hips bruised from uneven ground, soles bruised from bark shoes that barely qualify as such anymore. But your mind is quiet, not blank, just observant, like the fire, like the land. The wind has shifted again, this time from the south, cool, with a whisper of moisture. You tilt your head and inhale slowly, catching the faintest trace of eucalyptus and ash, old ash, burnt long ago, carried now in particles too small to see. And then, faint beneath that iron, blood, not fresh, not close, but not imagined. You tense not from fear, but readiness. You've grown past fear, fears for minds that haven't adapted. What you feel now is a tension sharpened to a blade. You set your half-burnt root aside, draw your knees tighter, and listen. Then you hear it again, that breath. Not yours, not wind. Something exhaling through the bush, slowly, rhythmically, as if it's not trying to hide, but also doesn't care to announce itself. You stay motionless. The fire cracks softly. Somewhere to your left, a branch snaps under weight. Not wind, not random, purposeful, heavy. Then stillness. That's worse, because now you are being waited on. It's not approaching. It's watching, judging. You keep your head down. Let your body sag just slightly, like prey too tired to matter. It's a trick, one you learned from the birds. Let them think you've surrendered, and they'll lose interest, or they'll pounce. Either way, you'll know what you're dealing with. Mainstream fact: Australia is home to some of the most silent predators in the natural world. Dingoes. Big cats, though their existence remains contested. Feral dogs. And even the occasional rogue kangaroo can move with an eerie quietness that belies their strength. But it's not just the animals. The land itself participates, masking sound, softening movement, muting impact. Trees creak just enough to cover a misplaced footstep. Leaves shift just enough to hide the brush of fur. Nothing moves without permission, and nothing makes noise without cause. A less known, stranger detail in some indigenous stories. There are beings called shadow trackers, not spirits, not beasts, but echoes of old predators that never fully died. You can't see them, only sense them. They follow the ones who forget to notice, the ones who walk without rhythm, the ones who assume the bush is empty just because it's quiet. They don't attack outright. They wait, and if the land accepts you, they pass. If not, you disappear. Just another print in the dirt. Historians argue whether shadow tracker myths arose from early encounters with large predators now extinct, or if they serve a practical function, behavioral reminders hidden in story form. Walk with awareness, don't travel alone, leave no trace, don't sleep too deep. You've followed all those rules, mostly. Still, the hairs on your arms rise, even under the layer of soot and clay that has become your second skin. You let time pass without trying to measure it. The fire burns lower, the bush doesn't move again, the breath you heard gone, or perhaps never real. But your body still hums with readiness. You curl on your side, facing the fire, walking stick drawn close, eyes half lidded but never fully closed, and sometime between one blink and the next, you drift. Dawn arrives with no fanfare, just a thinning of the dark, a bleaching of the stars, a return of the birds. Not all of them, just the smaller ones. The scouts, their chirps are brief and efficient, as if announcing that nothing died loudly enough to interrupt their schedule. You sit up, slowly, bones stiff, mind clear. You eat the root from last night. It's dry, hard to chew, but it fills the corners of your stomach just enough. You sip the last of your water and feel it pass your throat like a ribbon of cold fire. Time to move again. You walk west, always west, not because you're sure it leads anywhere, but because turning back feels like a kind of betrayal now of your own body, your own rhythm. The sun rises behind you, casting your shadow ahead like a silent scout. The ground rises gently, the trees thinning, the brush shortening, and then you hear it, the low, slow scrape of metal against stone. You freeze. It's not an animal sound, not wind, not natural. You duck low and move toward the sound, slow as breath, cresting a hill. You peer through the scrub and see it, a figure hunched beside a rusted metal basin, half buried in sand. An old water drum, long empty. The figure moves methodically, scraping, tapping, checking, not frantic, not desperate, just old. The man is thin, hair white and matted into ropes, clothes stitched together from canvas and leather and time. He hasn't seen you. You step forward once. His head turns slowly. His eyes find you instantly. Neither of you speak. For a long moment, the only sound is the wind pushing through dry grass. Then he nods once. A shallow gesture. You nod back. It's enough. You don't approach. You don't retreat. He returns to his drum. You turn and walk away. Not because you fear him, but because there's nothing he has that you need, and nothing you carry that he wants. In another life, in another time, maybe you'd share a fire, a story, a silence. But out here, companionship is a luxury measured in risk. The land doesn't like crowds. You descend again, this time into a shallow valley lined with smooth stones and dry trees. You find a cave, shallow, but shaded. The inside smells of dust and old fire. You kneel and press your hand to the back wall. The stone is cool. You close your eyes and rest your forehead against it. Not praying, just listening, feeling. The pulse of the bush echoes faintly in your bones now. You can almost hear it, the rhythm of ants marching, the soft footfall of something small, the breath of the tree roots beneath your knees. And for a brief second, you feel still. Not because danger is gone, but because you've stopped running from it. You lie down in the shade, one arm across your chest, the other still gripping the stick. You don't need dreams anymore. You just need quiet. And tonight, the land is willing to give you that. The cave holds the coolness long after the sun has climbed overhead, and you let yourself stay curled in its shallow mouth for longer than usual, feeling the stone's calm bleed into your spine. There's no fire today, no food either, but your body has grown used to the absence of both, and the ache in your gut has dulled into a steady presence you now carry like a pouch slung over your shoulder, heavy. But expected, outside, the bush moves slowly. Trees creak with heat tension. Small insects clatter against bark. and the air quivers with the humming electricity of midday. But nothing feels urgent. The danger has not disappeared, only stepped aside. The silence that once screamed now sighs, and you can hear the difference. You rise, brush red dust from your arms, adjust your bark-wrapped soles, and step back out into the world like someone returning from a long confession. You move north now, not by design but by instinct. The ridges rise to your right, the plains stretch to your left, and the wind nudges your shoulder like a guide who never speaks. There are no tracks to follow, but your body is a map now. Muscle memory knows which slopes hold shade, which shrubs conceal thorns, which birds signal water. You pass termite mounds that lean like tired men, stones etched by wind until they resemble faces. You pause once to rest beneath a tree whose bark peels in long sheets, curling like forgotten scrolls. Beneath it, you find an old cooking pit, just a ring of blackened rocks, a scatter of bones, and a bit of melted glass. Human, recent, but no longer near. You stir the ash with your stick, then move on. Mainstream fact: Australia's interior has always been shaped more by abandonment than occupation. Tribes moved with the weather, with the game, with the seasons. Settlements were momentary, the land too demanding for permanence. Even today, explorers report stumbling across ancient fire pits, tools embedded in stone, etchings so worn they look like veins in the rock. No fences, no boundaries, just faint signatures left behind by those who passed quietly and wisely. Through one lesser-known insight, some elders say the bush keeps memories in objects. A stick left where none should fall, a bone placed upright in the dirt, a scar on a tree shaped like a face. These aren't just remnants, they're signals, whispers from the past for those who know how to read. You think of that now as you step around a perfect circle of stones, seemingly random, but too symmetrical to be chance. You don't enter, you don't touch, you nod once, low, and keep walking. Your path takes you into a gully of red stone, narrow and winding, with walls that rise on both sides like the throat of a giant creature swallowing light. The air here smells different, cooler, damp with the memory of water. You see streaks on the rock where runoff once raced through, and in the crevices, thin ferns cling like eyelashes. You walk in shadow now. Your skin breathes relief, your thoughts unfurl, and then you find it. A pool, real, not a mirage, nestled in the bend of the gully, half shaded by rock, surface still and deep green. You kneel, heart thudding not from thirst, but awe. It's beautiful, hidden, unspoiled, and most surprisingly untouched. No prints, no scat, no broken reeds. As if the bush built it just for you. You lean over the surface and catch your reflection, mud-streaked, sunburned, gaunt, eyes wide as the sky. You look like something that belongs here, something carved from bark and grit and fire. You dip your hands into the pool and drink, slowly, reverently. The water is cold, metallic, alive. You strip down, wash your arms, your chest, your legs, not to get clean. That's not the goal. The dirt is part of you now, but to remind yourself that your body still holds shape beneath the layers of survival, that you're still here, still recognizable, even if only to yourself. You splash water on your face and blink it away. No tears, just water. A mainstream fact: natural springs and gorges like these are rare and sacred. Some remain secret even today, known only to certain families, passed down by story and song. Many are protected under law, but others remain unmarked, invisible to satellites and tourists alike. In dreaming lore, these are places where spirits rest, where ancestors gather, where the skin between worlds is thin. A stranger belief, whispered rarely and always with a glance over the shoulder: some pools are sentient, not alive like animals, but aware. They test you, watch how you drink, how you bathe, how you leave, spill blood in them, and the land will turn against you, but offer silence, stillness, respect, and they will remember you, offer you again. You dress, fill your flask, and climb the gully wall to mark your position. The sun is lower now, angled like a blade across the trees. You descend carefully, leave no prints at the water's edge, and move away without looking back. Not because you don't care, but because you do. Some gifts demand you don't linger. The bush opens again as you move northward, now with water in your pack and lightness in your legs. The exhaustion remains, but no longer claws. You walk with something closer to rhythm now. Purpose. You're not looking for shelter. You're not chasing rescue. You're simply moving, aware of every step. You're part of the equation, not the error. You walk until the sky turns copper, until your shadow stretches ahead of you like a warning, until the earth flattens and the horizon returns. There, in the last light, you see it a figure, standing, still, too far to see clearly, but undeniably human, not the old man from days ago. Someone taller, younger, arms by their side, facing you. You stop. The wind dies. The insects pause. You raise a hand slowly. They don't respond. Just stand, watching. A test, a memory, a ghost. You blink. They're gone. You wait. Minutes pass. The bush resumes. You don't chase. You don't doubt. You just mark the place in your mind and turn away. You find a tree with a hollow large enough to lean against, and you settle your back there. The fire tonight is almost ceremonial 3 sticks, barely more than a glow, just enough for smoke, for continuity. You don't need the warmth. You need the ritual, the act of tending, the illusion of home. As night deepens, the stars reappear, this far from towns, from anything resembling noise. The sky blooms fully, layer upon layer of light, infinite and uncaring. You feel small, and somehow comforted by that. You lie on your side, one hand pressed into the dirt, the other beneath your head. No fear, no dreams, just rest. And somewhere far off, a bird calls. Once, then silence. Tomorrow, you'll keep walking. But tonight, you sleep. You wake before the sun, not from sound, not from fear, but because the stillness has reached its fullest point, and your body, now more animal than man, senses it's time to move again. The fire is ash. The air is cool, cool enough to remind you you're still a body, not just a will dragging meat across heat. You sit up slowly, spine crackling, joints stiff like bark that never fully softened. Around you, the bush is painted blue by the coming light, every branch and shadow washed in quiet. You eat nothing, you drink sparingly, then you stand. There's no reason to linger, not because anything chases you, but because you no longer belong to the idea of stopping. Your rest comes in motion now, your peace from the rhythm of your own survival. You check your bearings not with a compass, but by the pull in your gut, the shape of the wind, the lean of the grass. Then you begin to walk, one foot, then the other, same as yesterday, same as the day before. The trail narrows into something less than a trail, a suggestion of movement through sparse underbrush. The terrain is open but deceptive. What looks flat becomes suddenly sloped. What looks dry is slick with dust sweat. What looks safe often isn't. You pause to rewrap your makeshift shoes, now little more than layers of fiber and stubbornness. The soles worn to nothing. You bind them tighter, using long strips torn from your undershirt, fraying now at every edge. But they hold. They always hold. Until they don't. Your feet are calloused beyond pain. The skin isn't soft anymore. It remembers every stone, every thorn. It has learned, like you, how not to scream. As the sun breaks over the ridge behind you, it lights the trees ahead in gold and orange. And for a moment, it's almost too much, too beautiful, too alive. It's the kind of beauty you don't get to enjoy. Not fully. Not when everything around it still wants something from you. The land doesn't give beauty for free. It offers it like a question, a distraction. You nod toward the light anyway, as if saying, I see it, but I'm not fooled. Mainstream fact, the central bushlands of Australia receive less than 250 millimeters of rainfall annually. Drought is not an emergency. It's a baseline. Plants here aren't just survivors, they're specialists in refusal. Spinifex curls into itself to avoid evaporation. Acacias drop leaves to save themselves. Some shrubs sleep through entire seasons, then bloom for 3 days after a storm and vanish again. You walk through this quiet drama every day, and it never asks for your applause. And the strange truth, some believe the plants speak not in words, not in metaphor, but in rhythm. A certain tree leans toward water. A specific flower blooms when the temperature dips. The color of dust changes before rain. The angle of a leaf can warn of wind. You no longer see these as trivia. You read them now, like lines on a face, like signs in a dream you've learned to navigate by feel alone. Today, the signs pull you downhill. You follow without resistance. The land flattens briefly. The undergrowth thins. You move through a field of dry grass taller than your waist, the stalks brushing your arms like old whispers. Something stirs in the distance movement, low and fast. You crouch, wait, then see it a kangaroo, then another, smaller. They're grazing on something you can't see, their heads bobbing, ears twitching. You hold still. They don't flee. They've seen you, judged you, decided you're not worth worrying about. That feels like an honor. You move on once they drift away. Midday heat returns with a weight that pushes down through your shoulders, your spine, your heels. You sweat freely, the salt stinging your cracked lips, your collarbones carved sharp from weeks of thin eating. Your flask is nearly empty again, but you don't panic. You've gone further with less. You know the signs now, the birds that circle close to springs, the trees that bend toward damp roots. You trust the land not to save you, but to show you enough. And that's all you need. By early afternoon, your legs are trembling with the kind of fatigue that no longer asks to be fixed. It just exists. But you walk anyway, because the only alternative is stillness. And stillness, is what predators wait for. You pause only when a breeze cools your skin, your one moment of luxury. Then you press forward. The ground changes again, softens, darkens, moisture nearby. You follow it. You find a creek bed, not flowing, not full, but real, damp sand beneath the top layer. You dig with your hands, slow and steady. Water pools, just a little, enough. You drink, wash your face, fill your flask. You rest in the shade of a rock formation shaped like a wave, its curves eroded by centuries of wind. You eat the last shred of root in your pouch. Your hands shake, but not from hunger, from remembering hunger, from knowing it too well. Late in the day, the bush changes color again. Red gives way to gold, gold to gray. The sky grows heavy. The wind returns, harder now, carrying scent, smoke, not fire, not danger, just presence. Somewhere nearby, someone has burned something recently. You climb the nearest rise, scan the horizon. Nothing. No movement. No figure. But you feel it. You're not alone. You haven't been alone for some time. But now, it's undeniable. You descend as the sun lowers, casting the bush in shadow. You find another hollow between rocks. Near a fallen tree, you gather wood. Build your fire small. Feed it dry leaves and twigs. It smolders, then breathes. The smoke rises like an offering. You sit close, knees drawn, arms wrapped tight around your chest. Your skin itches beneath the clay. Your eyes sting with salt, but you are warm. You are dry. You are here. And then, just before the light dies completely, you hear it again. A sound. Not animal, not weather. A voice. Distant. Low. Maybe not even real. Just one syllable. Not a name. Not a warning. Just sound. Human. You don't respond. You don't call back. You wait. Heart slow. Breath even. The voice does not return, but neither does the silence feel the same. Mainstream fact, many people lost in the Bush report hearing voices, not in the mind. Not hallucinations, but actual voices, calling faintly, from the trees, from nowhere. Some say it's stress, some say it's memory. Others say it's the bush, speaking in the only way it knows how, by echoing what you most hope to hear. A quirkier belief, the bush does not speak in words, but it listens in them. that if you speak with truth raw, broken, breathless, the bush may answer not with language, but with direction. It may not care, but it notices. You've stopped speaking altogether, not because there's nothing to say, but because silence has become your clearest dialect. As night falls, you lie back on the hard earth, your body forming a familiar shape in the dust. Your fire burns low, the stars return, the moon is gone tonight. Only sky, only cold light, and you, alone. Not hunted, not welcomed, just permitted. The land has not accepted you, but it has stopped rejecting you. And tomorrow, you will walk again. No destination, no rescue, just rhythm. One foot, then the other, until nothing separates you from the bush but memory. Now the journey softens. The fire has died to a glow, and even the embers seem to breathe slower, as if they, too, are easing into sleep. Around you, the bush no longer whispers, it exhales. The insects hum, but gently now, no longer urgent. Somewhere in the distance, a single bird calls and is answered by silence. The sky has turned to velvet, dark and wide and strewn with stars too numerous to count. You lie back, and the ground accepts your weight without resistance. Your breath slows, not because you force it to, but because there's nothing left to outrun. You're not safe, not truly, but for the first time, you do not need to be. The land is still watching you. Yes, but it no longer flinches at your presence. You've stopped speaking, stopped asking, stopped trying to bend the bush to your will, and in return, it has stopped pushing back. Your eyes begin to close. You are hungry, you are tired, you are dust and bark and cracked skin, but more than anything, you are still here. You've seen things that don't explain themselves. You've walked where no tracks remain. You've become quieter than the wind, steadier than thirst, softer than firelight. And now, you sleep. No final thought, no prayer, just the quiet descent into darkness, like a stone sinking into deep, still water. Let it all fall away now. The fire, the walking, the watching, the sound of your own name. There is only breath, and the land, and you, finally, at rest. Sweet dreams.